Welcome back, and in this video I'll be answering what happened to Reeve's Superman. In this video I'll give a full history background up to recent events in the Arrowverse in the CW network, where his incarnation appeared reprised by Brandon Roth in Crisis of Infinite Earths. I wanted to do this video because Reeve's Superman will always be my favourite, and he was, in my opinion, the best Superman, and he made us believe that a man truly could fly. So grab a drink and sit comfortably, because this will be a long one. Kal-El was born the son of Jor-El, a member of the Science Council on the planet Krypton, who had trouble convincing them that Krypton and its sun are on the verge of destruction. Undaunted by their ignorance, Jor-El develops a starship in which he will send his son to a primitive planet called Earth. Both Jor-El and his wife Lara bid their son a sad goodbye as the starship is launched from Krypton minutes before the planet and its sun explodes. The starship carrying Kal-El travels through space, causing the child to age a few years, while also educating him. It burns up as it enters the Earth's atmosphere and crash lands in a nearby field in Smallville, causing Jonathan and Martha Kent to pull over and investigate. They see a young 3-year-old child emerge from the wreckage, unharmed. The Kents discuss what they wish to do with the child when the truck falls off the jack, almost crushing Jonathan, who was working underneath it to change a flat tire. Kal-El easily lifts up the truck, making the Kents wonder if the child really came from outer space somewhere. At age 18, Kal-El, who is now Clark Kent, is busy putting away equipment for the Smallville High School's football team when his friend Lana Lang invites him over to listen to records. Clark accepts the offer, but realizes that he has so much work to do, and so watches Lana drive off with her friends. Frustrated, Clark kicks a football high into the air and then races back home at super speed, amazingly outracing an approaching locomotive. His adopted father, Jonathan Kent, tells him that he was brought here to Earth with the powers he has for a purpose, and it wasn't for showing off in front of his friends. As Clark tries to get his father to race him to the house, Jonathan suffers a fatal stroke and dies, making Clark feel ashamed that with all his powers he couldn't save his father. After a few months pass, Clark hears the call of a mysterious green crystal hidden in his parents' barn. He realizes that it is time to discover his purpose and bids an emotional farewell to his Earth mother. He soon departs on a journey to the Arctic and uses the crystal to build the Fortress of Solitude, a majestic crystal palace in the architectural style of his home planet Krypton. Inside, Kal-El learns the reason he was transported to Earth and his future role on the planet from holographic recordings of his father. After 12 years of education and training within the Fortress of Solitude, he emerges garbed in a red cape and blue bodysuit with the House of El family symbol on his chest, and flies off. Clark returns to civilization. Arriving in the city of Metropolis, he's hired as a reporter for the Daily Planet newspaper by its editor-in-chief, Perry White. While there, he meets teenage photographer Jimmy Olsen and the paper's star journalist Lois Lane. Clark becomes immediately infatuated with Lois, but is unable to properly gain her affection, while in the bumbling guise of Clark Kent. It isn't long before Clark's true nature is unveiled when in his blue suit and red cape he publicly rescues Lois from a helicopter accident atop the Daily Planet building. Following a series of incidents in which Clark, in his yet unnamed guise, comes to the rescue and saves the day, Perry White issues to all his reporters to find out as much information as possible about this mysterious hero. Lois receives an invitation to meet someone at her place, signed only a friend. Following a perfunctory interview with the Man of Steel, Lois joins him on a flight over Metropolis, obstinately to see how fast he can go. After their romantic flight, the costumed hero flies off and Lois says to herself, "What a Superman," then pauses and says, Superman, thus giving the mysterious man his name. Meanwhile, supercriminal Lex Luthor is intent on committing the greatest real estate swindle of all time. With the unwitting aid of the US government and the test launching of 2 ICBMs, to accomplish this, Luthor hopes to cause a major earthquake in California by using the missiles, one of which he has programmed to hit the San Andreas Fault. The other has been programmed to head east to detonate in Hackensack, New Jersey, providing a diversion for the westbound rocket. The quake will cause most of California to slide into the ocean, killing millions of people, while simultaneously making the vast tracts of worthless desert land that he had quietly purchased skyrocket in value when it becomes the new west coast of the United States. With Superman's fame rapidly spreading, Luthor perceives him to be a serious problem, luring to his lair with a phony threat to gas the population of Metropolis. Having succeeded in attracting his attention, he traps the superhero with a nodule of kryptonite, the only thing to which he is vulnerable. However, Superman effects an escape with the help of Luthor's assistant, Eve Tessmacher, who is both attracted to Superman and frightened for the fate of her mother, who happens to live in Hackensack. Superman keeps his promise and diverts the path of the Hackensack missile first, forcing it into space. In the meantime, the California missile hits the San Andreas Fault, triggering the massive earthquake Luthor had intended. The length of the fault is devastated by the initial quake, but Superman prevents the catastrophic landslide Luthor intended by plunging deep into the earth to shore up the fault line. However, the quake's violent aftershocks still cause massive damage that creates multiple disasters as he builds a natural dam from rocks and boulders to stop the flooding caused by the breaching of the Hoover Dam. Superman realizes that he has forgotten about Lois. He discovers her car fallen into a crevasse that opened up behind it and closed again, trapping her inside and crushing her to death. Overcome with grief and fury, Superman flies into the upper atmosphere of the Earth, where he hears Jor-El's voice forbidding him to interfere in human history. Disobeying his father, Superman flies around the Earth until he is moving faster than the speed of light, thus travelling back in time. This is visually represented in the film by the Earth appearing to spin backwards. So, no, ladies and gentlemen, he doesn't physically spin the Earth. It looks like that because we're watching him go back in time. He goes back and prevents the Hoover Dam burst and fixes the fault line in such a way that the crevasse doesn't reach Lois's car. The reversal stops at the point where the earthquake began. He then flies back to Lois, who is alive and well. Superman bids farewell and flies off with a task to finish. Jimmy Olsen then mentions that it is unfortunate that Clark is never here to see Superman, and it is this moment only that Lois suspects that Superman and Clark may be the same person. Only to dismiss it as the silliest idea. Superman captures Luthor and Otis and delivers them to prison. The prison warden thanks Superman for his efforts, while Superman modest demeanours, insisting that we're all part of the same team before flying off. Years later, Clark learns from Perry White that Lois is in France, where terrorists who have seized the Eiffel Tower and have threatened to level the city with a hydrogen bomb. While in the course of rescuing Lois, the bomb is activated and Superman throws the elevator out of the atmosphere and into deep space, where it explodes. The shockwaves shatter the crystalline conduit in the which contains a doorway to the Phantom Zone, now floating near Earth, and Zod, Non, and Ursa are released. Lex Luthor, meanwhile, finally breaks out of jail with the help of Miss Tessmacher, using a hot air balloon, but leaves Otis behind as bait so he can escape. Using the black box device, he goes north to the Fortress of Solitude. Luthor, activating the Fortress control panel, then learns from the hologram recordings of Jor-El about the 3 Kryptonian villains who have escaped. He decides that he will collaborate with the Kryptonian villains to defeat Superman and take over the world. Superman and Lois Lane at the Fortress of Solitude. Clark and Lois are on assignment in Niagara Falls, Ontario, investigating what Perry calls a honeymoon racket. Superman rescues a boy who falls over the railing, and Lois suddenly decides it's far too convenient that Clark disappears every time Superman makes an appearance. She tries to prove it by jumping into the Niagara River, screaming for Superman to save her. Clark never changes identities, but, unbeknownst to Lois, uses his heat vision to break off a tree branch for Lois to use to stay afloat. However, later in their hotel room, Clark's powers are revealed when he quickly retrieves his fallen glasses from the fireplace. Pardon me. With his bare hands. Realising he wasn't burned, Lois realises the truth. After some hesitation, Clark admits the truth and takes Lois to the Fortress of Solitude, showing her the crystals which created and control the operations. Lois leaves the primary green crystal under her purse outside the control panel. Kal-El speaks to his father through the hologram about his desire to give up his responsibilities as Superman so he can live a normal life with Lois. Jor-El criticises Kal-El for his decision, but nonetheless offers him a choice. In order for him to relinquish being Superman, he must enter a crystal chamber and be exposed to to harness rays from the red solar energy like that of the Kryptonian sun. He will therefore lose his powers permanently and no longer be invulnerable, as he has been before. Despite his father's pleas to reconsider, Kal-El, without hesitance, enters the chamber and undergoes the depowering process, which culminates in the destruction of the crystal control panel. The two retire to his bedchamber and sleep together. Meanwhile, the three Kryptonian criminals have devastated a joint NASA-Soviet moon expedition, killing 3 astronauts. They fly to Earth, which they believe to be a planet called Houston, having overheard radio transmissions with mission control in Houston, Texas. They wreak havoc in a small town, easily defeating the US military. After defacing Mount Rushmore, the trio attack the White House, where Zod forces the President of the United States to kneel before him. Returning from the Fortress of Solitude, Clark is beaten up in a diner by a bullying truck driver. His despondent mood worsens when, in horror, he watches the President announcing the surrender of the Earth to General Zod. The President suddenly pleads for Superman's help, and Zod issues a challenge to Superman to face him. Realizing the danger posed to the world and the terrible mistake he made, Clark heads back to the fortress, now a darkened sanctum, and calls out to his father for help. Dreading that there may be no hope left, he then notices the green crystal glowing where Lois accidentally left it, the same crystal that has called out to him in his teenage years. He uses the crystal to activate the panel, and once more, Jor-El emerges in Jor-El's hologram emerges. He tells Kal-El about his terrible mistake and offers him one last resort to regain his powers. He will channel all of his remaining energy to his son, thereupon dying. Jor-El bids farewell and emerges in full body and spirit. Upon touching Kal-El, he restores his son's powers and dies by fading away. Kal-El emerges once again as Superman. He sees the green crystal glowing where Lois accidentally left it. Lex Luthor visits aboard Zod at the White House and negotiates a means to lure Superman to the villains by holding Lois hostage. He also reveals that Superman is the son of Jor-El, the Imprisoner. I love Terrence Stamp, he's cool. They arrive at the Daily Planet offices and sees Lois only to be interrupted by the arrival of Superman, his powers fully restored. A destructive battle ensues among the 4 Kryptonians as Superman struggles with the new experience of battling multiple enemies of his caliber. During the battle, Ursa and Zod discover Superman's weakness, his concern for human life, and use this against him. Finally, Superman flees, seemingly in defeat. Luthor convinces the villains that they must pursue Superman to his fortress. At the Fortress of Solitude, Superman attempts to distract the villains with a hologram that creates multiple images of himself. However, after grappling with Zod, Ursa and Non threaten to tear Lois limb from limb, quite literally, and Superman agrees to release Zod and capitulate to them to spare her life. Superman manipulates Luthor into tricking the criminals, counting on Luthor to double-cross him. Superman is forced into the same depowering chamber he used before, and the red light that drained his superpowers is actually set loose on the fortress while Superman is safe inside the chamber. Superman feigns weakness and then crushes Zod's hand after seemingly accepting it in submission. Lois easily dispatches the now powerless Ursa and Non leaps towards Superman only to find he can no longer fly. All 3 villains fall into the depths of Superman's fortress, apparently to their dooms. So they do die. He does kill bad guys. Superman and Lois leaving Luthor stranded in the fortress and fly away. Superman then uses heat vision He then turns back to Lois who realizes and agrees that Superman must continue to serve humanity, conforming to his father's wishes. After Superman flies her home, Lois begins to break down in despair. Although life would never be the same, she heartbreakingly assures Superman that she can be trusted to keep his secret identity, which Superman acknowledges consolingly, and he flies off. At the Daily Planet the following day, Clark finds Lois upset about knowing his secret but not being able to be open about her true feelings. Using his Kryptonian abilities, he kisses her, which seems to wipe her mind of the knowledge of past few days. Later, Clark returns to the diner and gets revenge on Rocky. He's been working out. Superman restores the damage done by Zod, replacing the American flag atop the White House, and tells the president he will not abandon his duty again. Years further on, Gus Gorman, an unemployed ne'er-do-well, discovers a knack for computer programming. After embezzling large amounts of money from his most recent employer's company payroll through a technique known as salami slicing. Making that one. Gorman is brought to the attention of the company CEO Ross Webster. Webster, a wealthy man who runs a large conglomerate called Websco Industries, is obsessed with the computer's potential in aiding him in his schemes to rule the world financially. Joined by his sister Vera and his psychic nutritionist, Lorelei Ambrosia Webster blackmails Gorman into helping him. Butchered that fucking name. Meanwhile, Clark Kent has convinced his newspaper to allow him to return to Smallville for his high school reunion. En route, he extinguishes a fire in a chemical plant containing numerous vials of unstable baltric acid, which, in gaseous form, would obliterate the entire population of the eastern seaboard. During the fire, intrepid photographer Jimmy Olsen, always getting in trouble, is injured with a broken fibula. Superman saves the plant while neutralizing the acid threat by freezing the surface of a nearby lake and dropping the enormous icy mass onto the plant. It's a comic book film. Gave it. In Smallville, Clark is reunited with childhood friend Lana Lang. Lana is now a divorcee with a young son named Ricky. Clark and Lana begin to share affection for each other, though Lana's former boyfriend Brad, Clark's childhood bully, and now an alcoholic security guard, is still vying for her attention. In Metropolis, Webster attempts to monopolize the world's coffee crop, infuriated by Columbia's refusal to do business with him. He orders Gorman to command an American weather satellite called Vulcan to create a hurricane to decimate the nation's entire coffee crop. Webster's scheme is thwarted when Superman flies into the eye of the hurricane, neutralizing it and saving the year's harvest. Perceiving Superman as a threat to his plans, Webster then orders Gorman to use his computer knowledge to create a synthetic kryptonite, remembering Lois Lane's Daily Planet interview from Superman, during which Superman identified it as his only weakness. Gus attempts to create a synthetic version of kryptonite, but after the computer fails to analyze an unknown element in kryptonite, he improvises by replacing the unidentified element with tar. Not an actual element on the periodic table, odd enough, but which he garnered the idea from a pack of cigarettes. Lana convinces Superman to make a personal appearance at her son's birthday party, but Smallville turns it into a hometown celebration for Superman. Gus and Vera, disguised as Army General and a whack officer, give Superman the chunk of kryptonite as a gift and are dismayed to see that it appears to have no effect on them. Didn't do a thing. However, the compound begins to produce symptoms. Superman becomes selfish, focusing on his lust for Lana, which causes him to delay in rescuing a truck driver from his jackknifed rig. Superman begins to question his own self-worth, and as the kryptonite takes effect, Superman becomes depressed, angry, and casually destructive, committing petty acts of vandalism such as blowing out the Olympic torch. I felt sorry for that guy. And straightening the Leaning Tower of Pisa. That was hilarious. Ross, seeing this, creates new plans and orders a supercomputer to be built. Superman suddenly surges his depression with a drinking binge, but is overcome by guilt and undergoes a nervous breakdown. After nearly crash landing in a junkyard, he splits into two personas: the evil, selfish Superman and the moral, righteous Clark Kent. The evil Superman and Clark Kent, the embodiment of Superman's remaining good qualities, engage in epic battle. Although Clark is initially overpowered by his alter ego, he eventually takes the upper hand feverishly strangling his evil identity until it fades from sight. Thereafter, he is restored to his benevolent former self. After defending himself from an MX missile, he goes to battle with Gorman's supercomputer, which, after attempting to suffocate him severely, weakens the Man of Steel with a ray of real kryptonite. Gorman, guilt-ridden and horrified by the prospect of going down in history as the man who killed Superman, manages to destroy the deadly weapon with a firefighter's axe. Whereupon Superman flees. The computer begins to malfunction, becomes self-aware, defending itself against Gus and draining power from nearby electrical towers, causing massive blackouts. Ross and Lorelli, the squeaky one, are able to escape from the control room, but Vera is pulled into the main entrance of the computer and transformed into a cyborg. Empowered by the supercomputer, Vera attacks her brother and Lorelli, with beams of energy which weaken and immobilize them. You don't hear her name being pronounced so much in the film. Superman returns with a small vial of acid derived from the chemical plant he saved earlier, and the instant heat emitted by the supercomputer causes the acid to turn volatile, destroying the machine and turning Vera back to normal. Superman flies away with Gus, leaving Webster and his cronies to face the authorities after dropping Gus off at a West Virginia coal mine, where he gives him a job reference. Superman returns to Metropolis and reunites with Lana Lang, who has decided to relocate to the big city and finds employment as Perry White's new secretary. After a few years, the Russians have an incident in space when the ship loses oxygen, in which they are saved by Superman. His alter ego Clark Kent later goes to his hometown of Smallville to check on his family's farm. He takes a crystal, the last one. Its power can only be used one time, and that will be his last link with Krypton. When he returns to Metropolis, he learns that the Daily Planet has been taken over by a tabloid tycoon who fires Perry White and hires his sexy daughter, Lacey, as the new editor. Lacey very soon takes a liking to Clark and tries to seduce him by asking him to come to her office while she is sitting on a desk showing off her long, smooth legs. Good morning. Clark tries to rebuff her advances, but she tricks him into going on a date with her. Everyone soon learns that the United States and the Soviet Union may soon engage in nuclear war, threatening the survival of the planet. Before taking action, he departs to the North Pole to seek advice from the spirits of his Kryptonian ancestors at the Fortress of Solitude, who warn him to not interfere, but rather flee to other worlds where war is long forgotten. At a meeting of the United Nations, he tells the Assembly that he is going to rid the Earth of all nuclear weapons. Over the next several days, Superman takes all the nuclear weapons and gathers them into a gigantic net in orbit above the planet. When he has almost all the weapons, he closes the net and tosses it into the sun. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor's nephew, Lenny, helps break Luthor out of prison. The pair steal a strand of Superman's hair that had been donated to a museum, whereupon Luthor creates a genetic matrix from the strand of hair and attaches it to the final American nuclear missile. After the missile's fired off into the air, Superman grabs the missile and throws it into the sun. A few moments after the missile explodes on the sun's surface, a ball of energy is discharged from the sun, which rapidly develops into a nuclear man. This nuclear man then finds his way to his father Luthor, who establishes that while he is indeed powerful, he will deactivate if isolated from the sun's rays or suitably bright artificial light. This resembles the Greek legend of Antaeus, a wrestler whose strength came solely from his bodily contact with the earth. A worldwide battle soon follows between Luthor's creation and the Man of Steel. While successfully saving the Statue of Liberty, Superman is injured by the radioactive nails of a nuclear man. To Lois discuss the Daily Planet, which has been turned into a tabloid newspaper, blares the headline that Superman is dead. Lois indicates a desire to quit and seizes Superman's cape for herself. Lacey begins to understand Lois's point and tries to follow her. Lacey also reveals that she actually cares about Clark. Lois ventures to Clark's apartment, filleted by radiation sickness. Clark staggers weakly to the terrace of his apartment, where he retrieves the last benevolent Kryptonian crystal and uses it to heal himself. Nuclear Man develops a crush on Lacey and threatens mayhem if he is not introduced to her. Superman therefore agrees to take Nuclear Man to Lacey in an attempt to disable the villain. Superman lures Nuclear Man into an elevator in the building, trapping Nuclear Man in it, and then pulls the elevator out of the building and flies to the dark side of the moon, heaving the elevator onto the ground there, not realizing that its doors are slightly open. As the sun rises, Nuclear Man breaks out of his makeshift prison, and the two resume battle on the moon's surface. At the end of the battle, Superman is driven into the ground by his opponent. Nuclear Man then returns to Earth. Meanwhile, Lacey begins to understand Lois's point and warns her father that they've got to quit being so recklessly sensationalistic and irresponsible with the paper and its media, and its media power. He tries to tell her more of his usual, that the business of the newspaper is business, but she angrily counters that no, Daddy, the business of the newspaper is journalism. If they don't, she warns, a disaster is sure to follow. Mr. Warefield scoffs at this until Nuclear Man bursts in and abducts Lacey. He flies her into outer space, where she, strangely enough, is unaffected by the lack of breathable atmosphere and air pressure. Oh, it's a comic book film. Shush. Meanwhile, Superman pushes the moon out of its normal orbit, casting Earth into a solar eclipse, which terminates Nuclear Man's powers. He then rescues Lacey from the arms of Nuclear Man, of whom he disposes by returning him to Earth and sealing him in the core of a nuclear power plant. Superman thwarts Lex and Lenny's returning Lex Luthor to prison, while Lenny is taken to Boys Town. Mr. White comes in, then restoring the old decorations to Mr. Warefield's disgust. It is revealed that Mr. White, he's the man, has been to the banks gathering help in securing a loan to buy back the controlling shares of the Daily Planet, to protect it from any further abuse by making Mr. Warfield a mere minority shareholder. Now that Mr. White is the practical owner of the Daily Planet can now return to being a serious paper to the relief of Lois and Jimmy. Later in a press conference, Superman declares only partial victory in his peace campaign, saying, "There will be peace when the people of the world want it so badly that their governments will have no choice but to give it to them." He then flies, resuming his watch over Earth as before. In his other adventures, he left Earth once to help with intergalactic peace. During this event, Supergirl revealed herself on Earth. When he returned, he not only resumed relations with Lois, unknown to them both, she was pregnant, although their relationship was jeopardized when Superman was missing for 5 years after astronomers discovered the remains of Krypton. He returns to Earth with a spacecraft crashing back into the Kent Farms crop field, and awakes the next morning reminiscing of his childhood. He returns to work as Clark Kent at the Daily Planet in Metropolis, where he learns that Lois Lane is now a mother and has won the Pulitzer Prize for her article "Why the World Doesn't Need Superman." Ooh, emotional damage! During Superman's absence, Lex Luthor has been released from prison, conning a rich widow into a sham wedding to get his hands on her money, and stolen Kryptonian crystals from the Fortress of Solitude. Luthor returns to Metropolis and experiments with a tiny fragment in a pool, which grows to immense size. The growing crystal causes a blackout, affecting the takeoff of a space shuttle-like vehicle owned by Richard Branson, interesting, to Boeing 777, which Lois Lane is aboard covering the story. Clark flies into action as Superman and stops the plane from crashing into a baseball field. The world rejoices the return of Superman's return, but Lois is more concerned with a blackout. Clark meets her fiance Richard White, nephew of the Daily Planet editor-in-chief Perry White, and their son Jason. Superman is hurt when he overhears a conversation between Lois and Richard in which she says she never loved Superman. That's a lie. He buries himself in his work, including halting a bank heist and saving Kitty, Luthor's co-conspirator. While Kitty distracts Superman, Luthor steals kryptonite from a museum. Perry assigns Lois to interview Superman whilst Clark investigates the blackout. At night, Lois goes out for a smoke on top of the Daily Planet, and Superman takes her for a flight, during which he apologises for leaving her. After a later Superman interview, Lois focuses her attention on the blackout again. and learns where it all started. Lois and Jason sneak onto Luthor's ship, not realising who owns it, and are captured. Luthor reveals his grand scheme, using one of the stolen Kryptonian crystals to grow a new landmass. Even though he is aware it will destroy the United States and kill billions, he also inquires as to who the father of Jason is after noticing Lois's reaction to the kryptonite being near her son. Luthor launches the crystal, now encased in kryptonite, into the sea, causing a chain reaction resulting in its massive growth. Lois faxes their coordinates to the Daily Planet and is attacked by a henchman. Jason throws a piano at him, dun dun dun, in an apparent display of super strength, and after hearing news of the incident, Luthor imprisons them in a gallery as he escapes in a helicopter. Time to leave. The landmass grows, causing destruction in Metropolis, which Superman attends to, and Richard arrives in a seaplane to rescue Lois and Jason from the ship, which splits in half and sinks, with them trapped inside. Superman rescues them, and he flies off to find Luthor, who has returned to the landmass. Meeting Luthor, Superman discovers the landmass is infused with kryptonite, which allows Luthor and his henchmen to beat and torture him. Luthor stabs Superman with a shard of kryptonite, after which he falls into the ocean. Lois makes Richard turn back to rescue Superman, and she removes the kryptonite shard from his back. Actually, it was his rib. Never mind. Superman regains consciousness, gathers more energy from the sun, and lifts the landmass into the atmosphere. Luthor and Kitty escape, but before that, obviously, Luthor and Kitty escape in their helicopter, but not before Kitty tosses the crystals. She and Luthor are stranded on a desert island sometime later. Superman throws the landmass into space, but weakened by the kryptonite, crash lands back to Metropolis. The doctors cannot penetrate his body with their medical equipment, but manage to remove the rest of the kryptonite from his wound. While Superman remains in a coma, Lois and Jason visit Superman at the hospital, where, careful not to let Jason overhear, Lois whispers a secret in Superman's ear. Basically, Jason, Superman's kid. Superman later awakens and flies to see Jason reciting his father's last speech to him as he sleeps. Lois also starts writing why the world needs Superman. Not much is known after these events. However, years later, during Crisis of Infinite Earths, before the events of Crisis, he at some point married Lois Lane, probably because Jason's identity surfaced, etc. After a time or so, a reject from Gotham, possibly the Joker himself, believed the Daily Planet wasn't covering him enough. He played a practical joke, as he called it, and gassed the building, killing nearly everyone inside, including Lois and countless friends and co-workers of Clark's. Despite this great tragedy, unlike in the Injustice universe, Clark held on to hope, as he believed it would shine through the darkness, a belief which he symbolised by embracing a black and red crest. Also, he had his kid as well to look after as well. During the Crisis of Infinite Earths, after the Monitor found a Kryptonian who felt a great tragedy to be the paragon of truth, Clark was visited by Clark Kent and Lois Lane of Earth 38 and Iris West Allen, who explained the situation to him. The Paragons were needed to save the multiverse, but Lex Luthor was out to kill all of its Supermen. Luthor promptly arrived, and using the Book of Destiny to make Earth 96 the name given by CW to the Christopher Reeve universe, attack the Earth 38 Clark. They briefly fought, but after Lois knocked Lex out, they were able to get through to Earth 96 Clark and stop him. They returned to their base of operations, the Wave Rider, where Clark met his Earth 38 counterpart's son, as well as Clark's Earth 1 doppelganger, Ray Palmer. During the Anti-Monitor crisis, Clark joined the Council of Superman. Damn, shame they didn't show that, that would have been cool. Clark then teamed up with John Jones to defend the remaining quantum towers, but they were ultimately unsuccessful as every Earth was lost to the antimatter wave. They were forced to return to the Wave Rider in Earth 1, the last universe remaining. Once back on the Wave Rider, the heroes were greeted by Harbinger, who had returned after mysteriously disappearing. Pariah also appeared, and the heroes realized that Harbinger's return was a trap by the Anti-Monitor, who proceeded to incapacitate the heroes, kill Marveau, and destroy Earth 1. Realizing what the Monitor wanted him to do, Pariah managed to send the 7 Paragons to the vanishing point, where the Anti-Monitor couldn't reach them. Pardon me? As the Wave Rider was destroyed and remaining heroes killed by the antimatter wave. At the vanishing point, the Paragons witnessed as Clark, Christopher Reeve's Superman, as it were, slumped over, disappeared, and was replaced by Lex Luthor, who had used the Book of Destiny to make himself the Paragon of Truth, switching places with Clark and succeeding in his mission of killing all Supermen. One month later, after the end of Crisis of Infinite Earths, where the Paragons and the Spectre created a new multiverse, including a new Earth 96. Superman was restored along with all his fellow Denzians. It also appears that in this new universe, no great tragedy occurred to him in the new timeline, since Clark is seen wearing his classic red and yellow crest on his suit while flying around the Earth as Superman. And there you go, a full up-to-date history of Christopher Reeve's Superman. Who knows? They may pay homage to him in the new Flash film. Who knows? So anyway, thanks for watching. If you like this video, hit the like. And if you haven't, then please show support by subscribing to the channel. Until the next video, take care and be well.